Hello and welcome. You're watching India Fights Back with your host, Rajat Kane. Well, in this edition of show, we'll talk about a very important issue concerning the vaccines, or to say new vaccines, that is the indemnity clause. The issue is assuming a central preposition with American pharma company Pfizer demanding indemnity clause for any claims for adverse side effects from administering its vaccine. The central government, in its discussion with Pfizer, which has indicated to provide its COVID-19 vaccine in July, well, speaking to press, Dr. V.K. Paul, he's chair of the National Expert Group on Vaccine Administration for COVID-19, said the Pfizer has requested indemnity against liability from all nations, including their country of origin, that is US. Dr. Paul said, and I quote, they have requested indemnity against liability to all the nations, even the US. We're examining this request. We'll take decision in the larger interest of people. It is under discussion, but there is no decision as of now. Well, to discuss further on this issue and what is the importance of indemnity clause, especially when it comes to the size and scale of a mass immunization program like ours. To discuss further on this issue, we're joined with Dr. Sunil Raina, Professor and Head of Department, Community Medicine, Dr. R.P. GMC Tanda from Himachal Pradesh. Many thanks, Dr. Raina, for joining us. And Dr. K. Madan Gopal, Senior Consultant, Health from Niti Aayog. Well, let me start with you, Dr. Madan Gopal. At the outset, let's forget what is between the government of India and Pfizer. But talking of the semantics here, what is the importance of indemnity clause?
Rajat, this is very pertinent question in the current discussions which are going on. So we would be wondering that what this indemnity is. Indemnity is a kind of insurance where the establishment, whichever is providing some services, they want some protection mechanism so that in case of any adverse events or anything, the country is not held liable for that. They want a surety against that kind of thing. For example, we have been having the indemnity clauses in many of the health insurance products and many insurance products, where the insurance company, they take the risk. You take the example of fire insurance, home fire insurances, where the insurance company, in case of any untoward effect, any untoward event, they usually cover the damages which have happened due to the fire. Similarly, when these vaccines which have now come, we do have indemnity coverage in our national program. So for the services which we are providing for family welfare services, family planning operation, that indemnity is there. If something goes wrong, the insurance is there to take care of the compensation, other things. So that security is there. Apart from that, with the vaccine which is now coming, in vaccine we do have some other mechanisms, but this indemnity is not there. Right now, the discussion around indemnity is there because all the vaccines which are there, which they have come up very fast with the advancement of technology. Now, the essential part, that the fourth phase, that is the post-market surveillance, that is still happening. During this phase, if something goes wrong, and in the interest of the people, when we are going for mass immunization, they want some protective mechanism so that in case of there are any lawsuits or any things, they are being protected against that. That's the kind of discussions which are going on around this indemnity.
That's really important. Many thanks, Dr. Madan Gopal, for your opening remarks. It has given quite a clear perspective on what does the indemnity clause per se means. Dr. Raina, I would like to bring in you here. Sir, given the size and scale of the vaccination program in India for COVID-19, how important does it get for the companies, for the government, and of course, other stakeholders to have a clear view and of course, understanding and accountability in terms of the indemnity issue?
I think this is very important, and probably Government of India is thinking in the right directions. Having an open discussion on it is very important, because no country whatsoever the size in this world has been able to mount a program, vaccination program of this proportion, or has ever imagined a vaccination program of this proportion at any point in time. So having the safety measures in place is the key. And in this, we also need to examine what the current companies which are running their vaccinations in India with regard to COVID, where do they stand? So this all has to be a process driven. Everybody, every stakeholder who is providing vaccines to India, and everybody who's expected to provide vaccines in the next 6 to 7 months, which is a part of our program wherein we are building capacity in India to develop, to give vaccines to Indians. So all of them need to be taken into account, and all of them need to be a part of this entire discussion, which focuses on indemnity. So whether we are giving it to Pfizer or we are not giving it to the companies which are otherwise giving us vaccines in India, this all needs to be taken into account. And a discussion should take into account all of these and come up with solutions which are helpful to all of these vaccine companies as well as to the people who are going to receive these vaccines.
Right, right. Dr. Madan Gopal, if you're talking of the government's perspective here, sir, what has been our history as a country in terms of the indemnity clause vis-a-vis mass immunization programs in the past?
Rajat, you might be aware that the India is having the largest vaccination program. We started our universal immunization program in 1985. After that, we started this adverse event following immunization surveillance program. So pharmacovigilance for vaccine adverse events, that's already ongoing since 1986. So we do have a mechanism in which for any vaccines or for any drugs, we do have adverse event, which could be mild, which could be severe, which could be very serious.
Right.
For that, this monitoring happens. And apart from that, there is a committee at the national level which usually monitors that, and they will have a causal and association relation with the adverse events. Whether it had the events which have happened, the seriousness which has happened, it is because of the vaccine or not. The committee is there which is having this. Otherwise, talking about the indemnity per se in the immunization program is not there. Though there are indemnity things, indemnity insurances in the other programs in the form of this family planning program, the doctors who is operating, they are covered under this. For immunization program, we don't have indemnity. So right from the beginning, we don't have any indemnity clause for the vaccination. And whatever adverse events and other things are there, if a causal association is been established by the national committee, then it has been referred to the manufacturer. So apart from that, because this is an emergency vaccine which has been administered to adult population, and usually the immunization which is happening, it is happening to the children and the pregnant women who are, and most of the immunizations happen to the healthy individuals. It's not the sick people who are taking immunization. That's why this indemnity, because all the vaccines are in the emergency use authorization. The company want to at least circumvent against the liabilities, the suit liabilities, lawsuit liabilities against themselves, so that all the adults are there. They can, if a 45 years person is there, they can die about other complications, other comorbid condition, other things. But as the things move on, the other rights issues also, the activists are also there, so that they want to circumvent that. That's why it becomes very interesting to understand this dialogue of this indemnity which is going on. Because 45 plus adult population, they are all healthy. They would be having some other comorbid conditions. And the vaccines, they are in the fourth phase, that is the post-market surveillance. And we don't know what would be the adverse effect. So they want to just see that how they are protected. Suppose a vaccine manufactured in US and a vaccine administered in some other eastern part of the globe. Something goes wrong, and the other when happens is the lawsuits are filed in the courts of the states if the vaccine is manufactured there. So they want to just safeguard against themselves so that this mass, because we don't know which. But having said this, another thing is that all the vaccines, they're having good experience. That means if you talk about Pfizer vaccine, which is in the process of discussion, they have already inoculated 20 crore doses with a very minimal adverse events. So that safety aspect is there. So another problem is that if indemnity is given to one vaccine, then there would be other. It can have an adverse impact on the other ongoing vaccination program. So
this
kind
is
of
really
dilemma
important.
is there. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. This is really important. Dr. Rena, I mean, there is this debate about, of course, like, safeguarding the companies or other companies safeguarding themselves against any adverse effect or while administering vaccines, given the geographical diversities from one part of the globe where they are possibly administering to other part of the globe. Now, do these companies actually have any case for indemnity clause, or the larger question here about safety of the recipients assumes paramount importance? Dr. Raina.
Look, when we talk of science, whether it's in the science of immunization or developing vaccines or any other science, the key to science is openness. You have to be open with it. So the companies have to be open with it. The governments have to be open with it. Individuals have to be open with it. So what these companies are claiming is that they want a waiver, or they want that this indemnity clause should be there. So can we take it as a blanket waiver, or should we examine it in view of the context of the scientific evidence that we have at this point in time? So let them examine our processes. Are we dealing with the processes which are there with regard to adverse events following immunization? Are they correct? If these processes are correct, they shouldn't be fearing it. So if these processes are not correct, they feel that there is something wrong with the way they are conducting their adverse events following immunization processes,
right,
then they would have to fear about it. So this is something that should go across both the tables. So the companies who manufacture vaccines and the ones who receive the vaccine, that's the individuals who receive the vaccines. At the end of the day, what do we want? This is an unprecedented situation. Vaccines have been brought in very rapidly just because we wanted to save the humanity. But you also want to ensure the fact that the vaccines are safe to be produced and given to the market at a larger level. So this is something that we need to ensure. You don't want that once we get it to the market and we are not able to ensure enough of safeguards. So it has to be at both the places, the companies who are delivering the vaccines and the ones who are receiving, as also the ones who are there in the pipeline, as Dr. Madan Gopal rightly pointed out. And as I said in my opening remark, there are n number of people who are entering into vaccine manufacturing and delivery in a country like India. They all need to be a part of this discussion. Where do they stand in this? And in this, so everything has to be taken into account, and something which is good for the whole world needs to be taken in and granted access. That's the way it is. Simple.
Well, that's important, granting access to something which is of importance to world. Dr. Madan Gopal, your take, how do we balance it out? I mean, requirement of vaccines at the same time, these companies seeking clauses or cover against any sort of adverse effects. And as you said, I just want you to elaborate further, as you said, if we give indemnity clause to one, I mean, there are other companies who will be seeking it, then how do we balance in terms of availability of vaccines?
There are two questions in this question. One is the indemnity for, and the vis-a-vis the other indemnity regulation for the other vaccine. Second is the availability of the vaccine. Right now, over the globe, whole of the globe is struggling with the shortages of vaccine. The COVAX facility, which was created by WHO, they are also not able to function effectively and supply the other vaccine because of shortage of vaccines. That's one thing. When everybody is grappling with the issue of shortages of vaccine, and and vaccines have now a proven weapon against this, against protecting the whole population. They have shown the important thing, how quickly, how rapidly you can do. The important thing is to how you build a stockpile. While the domestic manufacturing of the vaccines is being ramped up, we have to simultaneously find out from where you can get other vaccines, and the efforts are being going on. And the discussion, as the discussion progressing in the interest of the country, the government will take a decision whether to give some exceptions this time. In America, they have also, US also, they have asked for an exemption, and this indemnity has been agreed till to 2024. That means till 2024 that indemnity has been agreed. So there won't be any lawsuits against the manufacturers there till 2024. Besides that, WHO is also coming up with this vaccine injury compensation program for the COVAX facility. In US also, they are having vaccine injury compensation program where the person, if he is having adverse effect, they can file a lawsuit. Similar kind of mechanism do exist in the country. If somebody want to approach a court for the want of services, the consumer forum is there and the other courts are there. But this indemnity is always there. And it will be a part of the discussion, very crucial, because at this juncture, we require vaccines from whichever source is required. If some conditions are there, if we are based on the regulatory processes, based on the other factors which are usually factored during the part of discussions, uh, a, a call would be taken. I presume that we would be moving in the right direction for getting more and more stockpiles of the vaccine so that we can immunize our population at very fast. We do have capacity to immunize people very fast. We can, on a day, we can have 150,000 vaccination sites. That kind of capacity
Okay.
we do have. But we are not being reaching because the only limiting factor is the stockpile of the vaccine supplies. So, to, for getting vaccine supplies, whatever measures, whatever indemnity clause are there, whatever stand the government can take, they will always take a stand in the interest of the people of the country.
Dr. Madhugopal, before I move to Dr. Rena, just last question to you. I just want to pick your thoughts over there. Does, in terms of the psychology, I would say, little mindset of the recipients or the beneficiary of vaccines, having known that a particular company has a legal, or to say a cover that they wouldn't be sued for any adverse effect, will it lead to any sort of vaccine hesitation?
No. After this second wave, now people are eager, but in the rural areas, still some vaccine hesitancy is there.
Okay.
It depends on, because once the government starts the vaccination drive, there are other interested groups. We start a campaign against the vaccine, that the vaccines are not good. So these are the groups which instigate the people against all these kind of things. So all the companies, they want to safeguard against this kind of interest groups. So that's one thing. That's we have to, because if you look at the other things, other areas, you find that this interest group, they usually file for lawsuits, and the companies are made to make compensations. So that's one aspect. This hesitancy is not there urban areas, peri-urban areas, and vaccine eagerness is there in the urban areas. So somewhat hesitancy is there in the rural areas because of some other thing. But slowly and slowly, with the awareness and correct knowledge, this would be taken care. But I don't see much problem. This thought never comes to the mind of the people that I would be going for a lawsuit and other things if something goes wrong. They usually try, most important is that how to save that person, how to see that person, that the person is protected. That's the prime motive behind everything.
Right. Absolutely. Dr. Rena, I mean, last question here before we wrap up the show, sir. Sir, I mean, given the requirement of vaccines for us and the balancing act that we have just talked about, even your thought about, how beneficiary, the end user of the vaccine sees if they have this knowledge of indemnity clause, whether a company's vaccine is safe or whether it will add to any sort of hesitation in terms of clause. Dr. Rena,
again,
your closing remarks, sir.
These are two different questions. One is whether these indemnity clauses are going to help or not. You look at, as Dr. Madhugopal rightly pointed out, the Pfizer vaccine has been given to around 20 crore of people and is being rolled out across the world. And America has already brought a huge stockpile of these vaccines. If they say, the rough estimates say that they already have 5 times the number of vaccines that are required to vaccinate their people. If you look at similar vaccines, the Moderna vaccine, the UK has brought a large number of vaccines. So they have the huge stockpile of vaccines. Now, there are two things to it now. India, one, needs to look inward, need to identify more number of companies who are able to manufacture it in India and deliver the vaccines to Indians at a rapid rate. So we are able to produce much more number of vaccines, but also needs to look at stockpiling vaccines. That is something which may be needed in future as well. So at the end of the year, if we are able to vaccinate everybody, we will still need the boosters at some point in time if we are thinking on those lines. So stockpiling of vaccines is essential. And in that stockpiling, Pfizer is an important addition. Pfizer won't be something which we won't look to, or Moderna is an important addition. They all have to be looked into, because ultimately you are looking at vaccinating a large number of people with not 1 or 2 doses. Maybe you will need more than that. So they all will be needed, and this indemnity clause needs to be looked into that as well as other things. Fear should not be the one which should drive us into rejecting or accepting these clauses. What should drive us is an open discussion on it and taking into account what benefits the country, benefits our country the most. So that's something that should take precedence over everything else.
Absolutely. Many thanks, sir. So clearly the consensus here is indemnity clause, certainly that needs to be understood by all the stakeholders. At the same time, Our focus should be on what is of paramount importance for the country at this stage, of course, is vaccination and vaccination at a quicker pace. Well, many thanks, Dr. Rena, for joining us from Tanda, and Dr. Madan Gopal, sir, for joining us from New Delhi. Many thanks for elucidating on this important aspect. Well, that's it in this edition of India Fights Back. Stay tuned to Rajya Sabha TV for more. Thank you. Goodbye.